when it comes to women entrepreneurs, often related to things like an unpaid care work, to health and accidents. So this becomes highly important. So this is kind of the framework under which this project is operating in. Charlene will talk to us at the end of the presentation a little bit more on the conceptualization of this framework. But now I'll hand over to my colleague Amelie, who can start to share her screen. And yeah, I see a lot of questions coming in onto the text box, so that's great. And Amelie, I'll leave it to you so that you can go more into depth on what we've found in Somalia.
Thank you, Adriana. Okay. I'm now sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay, thank you, Adriana, for this great introduction to the business upgrading model of the Women Entrepreneurship Development Team. Welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm happy to be presenting the sectoral Women Entrepreneurship Development Assessment, which was conducted in the agriculture and renewable energy sectors of Somalia. Sorry, just remembered, well. Okay, so first I will present to you a bit the methodology that we adopted. So this methodology is based on ILO guidelines for sector selection, value chain selection, and national assessments for women entrepreneurship development. This assessment aims to bring forward key policy, strategic, and operational recommendations to advance representation and meaningful participation of Somali women entrepreneurs in their business environment and to enhance their contribution to socioeconomic growth. So the findings of this report inform the implementation of interventions pertaining to the project that is currently being implemented in Somalia. And we have the project CTA with us, who will be able to tell us a bit more about this later on during our conversation. So the two sectors that were selected for this assessment were the agriculture sector, which in Somalia is a female-dominated sector, absolutely essential to the economy. And the second sector was the sector of renewable energy, which is a growing sector with strong potential to integrate women entrepreneurs. So the take of the project on this sector is that because it is quite new, there is an opportunity to challenge stereotypes about women entrepreneurs in this sector. So the methodology of the sectoral WED assessment is based on a desk-based research on women's entrepreneurship development in Somalia, as well as a women entrepreneur survey, which was conducted in 2019 with about 500 women entrepreneurs, key informant interviews with key stakeholders, and all of this allowed us to identify two key value chains in the agriculture and renewable energy sectors. And finally, after a validation workshop, to formulate a few recommendations, which I will quickly present at the end of this presentation. So the analysis of the WED assessment and of the sectoral WED assessment is based on three main criteria in red here, and three sub-criteria for each, pertaining to each main criteria. So the main criteria are relevance to target group, opportunity for inclusive growth, and feasibility to stimulate change. Under these three main criteria, we then have three sub-criteria, which are the number of women active in the sector and the nature of their participation, the legal and regulatory system for SMEs in the sector, effective policy leadership and coordination for the promotion of entrepreneurship and women entrepreneurship development, sector growth and prospects for productivity, access to markets, access to technology, conduciveness of political economy and likelihood of distortion, availability of market actors, both financial and non-financial, and representation of women and men entrepreneurs and participation in policy dialogue. So I will first take you through our analysis, the analysis that we did for the agriculture sector. So agriculture is the backbone of the Somali economy. Its share in GDP is 75%. It represents 93% of total exports. what we did is look at three main subsectors, which were livestock, crops, and fisheries, and compare within these subsectors the three value chains of milk, sesame, and fish against the criteria and sub-criteria that were presented to you in the slides before. So here you can see on this graph a very quick representation of how these value chains scored against the three main criteria. And this brought us to select the milk value chain for further analysis. So why the milk value chain? Three sub criteria were quite strong and allowed it to be selected. The first one was relevance to the target group. So women are centrally engaged in the livestock sector. They control at least 80% of milk production and 100% of milk collection. And the second sub-criteria was sector growth, prospects for productivity, and working conditions improvements. So there is in Somalia strong potential for expanding and upgrading local processing and value addition in the value chain of milk production, which has been rising since the late 1980s. And in addition, Somalia imports dairy products while exporting none, even though livestock is the backbone of its economy. So we saw there quite a strong potential for creating value addition in the milk value chain. So this is a first preliminary mapping of the actors in the value chain. So we have on the left the scheme and functions of the value chain. So starting with the input, livestock, going through the production, processing, collection of milk, transportation. We have further processing happening also here, and then finally sale on local markets, the main actors and the main supporting functions. So among the main actors, we have the farmers and pastoralists. So here, it's important to note that women actually are often not the ones who own the cattle, but they're the ones who tend to them and provide the bulk of the care, and actually are the ones involved in milk collecting and sale of milk. There's also a division in terms of men will tend more to camels, while women will tend to cattle and small animals such as sheep and goats. So as we can see, women are involved at every step of the value chain, at the collection of the milk, then transformation, and as vendors when they bring it to the local markets. In terms of supporting functions, here I would like to point out that the preliminary analysis showed that the supporting functions are quite weak and would require strengthening. So for example, the fodder development function, the animal husbandry function, irrigation are all supporting functions which would require support for the value chain to be able to function better. And we will go a bit deeper into the several framework conditions for women entrepreneurs, which also are an impediment for women entrepreneurs to reach their full growth potential in this value chain. So now moving on to the renewable energy sector. Here in Somalia, there is quite limited energy access in the country. The electricity access rate is estimated at 15%. Price of the electricity is one of the highest in the world at $1 per kilowatt. However, there is growing interest in renewable energy technology with commitment from the government, as well as interest from the private sector, which is growing. There is significant potential for solar and wind power, and as we explained at the beginning of the presentation, an opportunity to promote the inclusion of women in this brand new and expanding value chain. So here we compared three value chains: the value chain of wind energy, off-grid solar, and grid integrated solar. And the value chain that we decided to select based on this comparison was the one of off-grid solar. So the reason for this is that sector growth prospects for productivity and working conditions improvements were rather high. So Somalia is one of the countries which is exposed to the most hours of sunlight per year. In addition, the current demand for solar home systems is estimated at around 140,000 to 180,000 units. And there are working conditions improvements to be made with health and safety issues related to lack of technical skills, which then bring to poor wiring and poor installation of equipments, which then create accidents. The second sub-criteria which was important for this decision here was the conduciveness of political economy, as solar is an incredibly popular option, as capital and technical skills required to implement it are much lower than for wind. And in addition, off-grid market shows promise for the activity of private companies. So this is a preliminary mapping of the value chain of off-grid solar. So we have on the left the schemes and functions, production, retail, installation, maintenance and repair, and recycling, which actually doesn't exist in Somalia. Production also doesn't exist in Somalia. Most of the solar products are actually imported from outside. And the quality of the products is very unequal depending on where it is imported from. So we can see that the main actors here are private sector companies and renewable energy companies, in which women are have a low representation. So they usually represent 10 to 20% of the workforce. These renewable energy companies then work with SMEs, retailers, and technicians who actually install or sell the solar products to a rural population, as we were talking about off-grid. In terms of the issues that we see in this value chain, the main issues are really lack of training, transportation of solar products, as in Somalia, the infrastructures are, the quality of the infrastructures is quite low, and there are also security issues. In addition, recycling is an issue, and there is quite a number of stereotypes around women being in charge of installation of solar products. So in our assessment, we highlighted a few main challenges and capacity building needs for women entrepreneurs in both value chains, but also some challenges which are common to the two value chains. So in the milk value chain, we have poor livestock and knowledge and management skills. We also have issues in terms of milk conservation and processing, and absence of economies of scales, as women entrepreneurs are often working in isolation from each other. In the solar value chain, we have a huge lack of technical skills at all levels, from basic to specialized, from simple electrician to engineer, and health and safety challenges as highlighted before. And in both value chains, women are facing strong gender stereotypes. There is the issue of informality. They also struggle to access finance. Some of them are not literate financially. They also have very low business management skills, and they often lack information and network. In addition, women in these two value chains face gaps in accessibility regarding markets and appropriate financial and non-financial services. So women's access to markets is limited. We see few women active in the areas where high profits are seen through exports and imports. There is a low participation in procurement programs, both public and private. And women have a lower access to technology, with mobile penetration for women being 50% compared to 90% for men, even though results of focus group discussions and surveys showed that smartphones were indicated as the second most important source of business and legal information. In addition, there is a low participation of women entrepreneurs in generic financing program. So women represent 1/3 of clients. This is due to, in part, to their lack of ownership of land and assets, but also to discrimination, which are an impediment to accessing loans. This is also due to the lack of financing programs specifically targeted to women-owned MSMEs, even though some efforts are being seen by isolated banks. And all of this means that women are overwhelmingly represented as clients of microfinance institutions. In addition, they also face low access to non-financial business development services. So from there, we then drafted and proposed 15 recommendations, which I will not go through all of them here. I will just present a few of them. These recommendations were meant to address the gaps which prevent women entrepreneurs from reaching their full potential and growing their enterprises. And they were provided at policy level, market level, and enterprises level. So I will present a few of them here, but then feel free to go to the report to see the full scope of the 15 recommendations. But one of the key recommendations is really to integrate the needs and concerns of women, including those in the informal sector, into MSME policy formulation and programs. And one of the ways to do this is to reinforce the representation of women entrepreneurs and their associations in existing Chamber of Commerce and sectoral associations, so that they're actually better able to bring their needs to the table and then be part of designing solutions through public-private sector dialogue. Another key recommendation was to develop a strategic policy framework for women entrepreneurship development and establish a national focal point for the promotion and coordination of women's entrepreneurship development. And finally, regarding access to financial services and gender-sensitive BDS services, we have the following recommendations, which are to encourage financial service providers and build their capacity to target women entrepreneurs with gender-sensitive products that take into account the specific needs of women entrepreneurs, meaning lack of access to land and collateral, their overrepresentation in the informal sector, and the adequate support that they would need to launch and grow their enterprises. In terms of gender-sensitive BDS services, reinforcing the capacity of local service providers to offer gender-responsive entrepreneurship development training and support. And I think Abdul can tell us a bit more about this in the discussion. And finally, access to markets and technology, encouraging governments, multinational and national enterprises, but also UN and donor procurement programs to adopt gender-responsive procurement practices. So this being at the level of the market, while also at the level of the women and their enterprises, sensitizing them in the various dimensions of the value chain they operate in to take advantage of those opportunities. So this is it for me. I will now share my screen with the next speaker.
Yeah, so Callie, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. See if I can maximize this. Cool. Okay, so thanks very much. So what we're really gearing up for next is to do a little bit of a deeper dive. So we're going to conduct rapid value chain analyses in the milk and off-grid solar value chains, which were the ones ultimately selected in the research and identified as having the greatest potential to move forward with. So we're going to take a deeper dive into these two value chains and to try to identify these systemic constraints. So what do I mean by systemic constraints? Well, I'm sure we all know that just addressing the symptom of a problem is very different than addressing the root cause. And oftentimes in development, we're very, very tempted to address the symptom. So that means, if your target group, say, was identified and was presenting low skills, insufficient skills in a particular industry, then we might say, like, okay, let's provide a training. But ultimately, that's not going to address kind of the larger issue of why there's low access to training in the first place. And these could be any one of multiple things. So this could be outdated curricula. Maybe the curricula is simply no longer relevant to the target group. This could be related to it being inexpensive and unaffordable. Maybe the target group is unaware of these opportunities and just simply doesn't have information about these training opportunities, or it could be something such as women not being able to leave the household for something like, they have no access to childcare. So this is kind of the deeper dive thinking that I'm talking about and that we want to apply in these next steps. So in this application, we're looking at these two sectors that were just presented in great detail by Emily. And they're slightly, they're very different in their makeup and their comprehension. So they're also going to have very different objectives. So looking at the milk value chain, which is located in Mogadishu. As Emily already explained, this is a very traditional sector. Women's participation is very high. And where they do participate, it's in much lower value-added segments of the value chain. Whereas in off-grid solar, this is a very new sector, growing very rapidly. Women's participation is quite low. And where they do participate, it's in low-skilled segments. So how that's relevant to our research objectives. For milk, we're going to identify and prioritize opportunities to promote inclusive growth of the sector, where the focus is really on upgrading women that are already participating in the sector. Whereas in off-grid solar, we're prioritizing opportunities to promote job creation with a focus on actually increasing women's participation in the value chain. And so there's kind of also this third element to the research, which is on cross-value addition. So we're looking at the framework conditions that can be improved that would actually support both sector in terms of empowering women. And also kind of looking at what could be working well in one sector that could be applied to the other. So building off of what was already done in the sectoral assessment that Emily just presented, we're just going to conduct a few more stakeholder interviews and focus group discussions specifically related to fleshing out the opportunities that Emily has already identified. So this includes talking further with women entrepreneurs, private companies in the two value chains, service providers, both related to business development services and financial services. We'll be speaking with technical training institutions, women's business associations, as well as several relevant government actors. And this is specifically to look for the underlying causes, the root causes to why there may be high business registration costs, why there's low access to financial services, to low quality inputs. Emily mentioned, fodder for cows in the livestock sector was very low quality. Why there's low productivity and competitiveness, insufficient skill sets, low market access, and access to the technology, et cetera. So really trying to just get to the underlying reasons why these things exist in the first place to make sure that we are recommending comprehensive interventions for the project moving forward. So ultimately, this analysis will, one, collect information from the field, identify these root causes to these varying constraints that we've observed in the systems around these value chains. We're going to prioritize opportunities based on what is most feasible for this project and what is likely to culminate in the highest impacts. Determine partners with the most capacity and willingness to advance project goals, to make sure that we have the right partners on the ground, and to ultimately ensure that whatever we do in this project is going to be sustainable. And obviously all of these things will be provided in recommendations in the format of specific interventions. And so that is it from my side. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Callie. I'll take over sharing the presentation now, and we'll move on to our discussants. So here we go. So I'll ask our discussants as well to turn their video on for a bit of a more engaging discussion. So we'll start with Charlene, who is the lead technical officer for the Women's Entrepreneurship Development Program, and who really started to conceptualize the business upgrading model and also the implementation of this project. So Charlene, I wanted to ask you a little bit if you could tell us about the genesis of this business upgrading model from your perspective as a lead technical officer, and how you envision this approach contributing to women's economic empowerment and to gender equality in general. Charlene?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And then I can't put on my video.
Okay.
If you can release the access.
So I've upgraded you to co-host, so maybe that way.
Okay, yeah, I think it will now. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much, Adriana, Amélie, and then Kali for taking us through this model. And then on the genesis of this model, I can say that, it's rooted in the ILO strategy on promoting women's entrepreneurship development, which provides us with strategic guidelines in addressing gender imbalances in private sector and enterprise development, including through value chain development initiatives. And then the contextualization of this model is the result of a continued effort by the ILO Women's Entrepreneurship Development Program to bridge the gender gap in the labor market and the business environment. So this model came obvious to us over the global observation that in most value chain development interventions, women are encouraged to enter sectors with traditional male occupations, while men are rarely encouraged to integrate female-dominated sectors. And then we are mindful that this might be because these sectors, so female-dominated sectors, are saturated or perceived as having little room for value addition. But the message seemed to be that women's contribution to economic growth have less value, and then leading to question the importance of economic diversification. And then we questioned ourselves. So how can we encourage women to enter male-dominated sectors? And most of the time, those sectors are like growth-oriented and also wealth generator. But at the same time, to also create value in female-dominated one, because those sectors are also essential for the economy. So how can we really balance? So based on these reflections, we developed two models: the entrepreneurship graduation for small-scale women entrepreneurs and the business upgrading model we are discussing today to support growth-oriented women entrepreneurs, meaning women entrepreneurs who already have an established business and are looking to scale up. And then this model, the business upgrading, acknowledges the importance and the potential of all the sectors of the economy to foster transformative changes. And then it's it applies this new concept also of cross value addition, where we compare the functioning of two value chains, and then we make a recommendation for interventions that are leveraged on the growth potential of each value chain to create inclusive conditions in the development of the other. And then taking into consideration the political, economic, social, and the cultural context. I will explain. In the case of Somalia, for instance, we have the dairy value chain, and then we have the off-grid solar. The value chain analysis will inform us of like the facets of these value chains, but the preliminary observation is that we have more women in the milk value chain, and then this is a traditional sector or value chain for women, so they are getting it like over generations. So women extract the milk and then sell the milk in market, so they feel comfortable working there, and then they can't really also they do not have like a lot of career development perspective working in the sector. And then on the other end, we have like the renewable energy sector with technology, with like growth and contribution to wealth. So how can we attract, so to see like factors that attract women in the milk value chain, being like, this is traditionally accepted, and then we can afford like a flexible time. How can we export this to the renewable energy sector so that with like a dialogue with actors, market actors, but also with like communities to make them feel like women can also be accepted in this sector. And then for the renewable energy, how can we also import technology to the milk sector? This might be a very long shot, but we need to start at some point. For instance, the milk value chain, I read Amélie's report where they were saying like, you know, processing is challenging. So how can we bring like a very basic automation to the sector so that they can have a small machinery to process the milk, and then make sure that they can keep them for a longer period and then sell them to the market and generate some revenue, instead of like having to throw milk because the quality is not the same as at the time that it was collected. You know, this kind of thing that we are planning to do based on this cost value addition method. And then this business upgrading model consists of 5 key components, as explained by Adriana, which are underpinned by a social protection mechanism. So a way to lay the foundation for business discontinuity and help women entrepreneurs also navigate social and cultural norms. And with this model, we think that gender equality and women's empowerment can come as a core concern in value chain development, promoting what we call, again, in another context, a gender responsive procurement ecosystem. With this kind of ecosystem, so this ecosystem entails the creation of an enabling environment when women's enterprises can, first of all, create quality job opportunities, and second, benefit from procurement opportunities by business linkages, adopt affirmative actions to buy from other women's or gender-responsive enterprises, participate in decision-making processes that impact the rules and regulation of the sectors in which they operate, because the idea is not only to have like women in a male-dominated sector or to make them create value in female-dominated sectors, but they also need to be empowered economically in a way that they have a say in the rules and regulation of the sectors in which they operate. And then lastly, to contribute to economic growth and also social progress. In this way, we believe it can bring some key game changers where the struggle for gender equality is not seen as basically a women's issue, but a significant pivot to achieve full and productive employment for all women and men. So this is what I can say about the genesis of this model. and also how we think within the ILO Women's Entrepreneurship Development Program, it can contribute to women's economic empowerment and gender equality, which is not a matter of only empowering women, but also creating conditions where women and men can benefit from employment and market opportunities. Thank you, Adriana.
Thank you, Charlene. And I'll circle back to you as we're getting quite a few questions on the chat box. Thank you. I'll just move on quickly to our other discussants and also perhaps pose some questions to them. So I'll move on to Kamau. Kamau, I have enabled your ability to turn on your camera. So yeah, if you can try and let me know. Perfect, thank you. So Kamau, you're working with SIDA. Can you tell us a little bit more about what SIDA's strategy regarding the development of the renewable energy sector is in Somalia, but also in Africa in general, and why it's important to integrate women in renewable energy value chains? And there's a few questions popping up in the chat box on this. I'll likely address them to you a bit later after your response to this one.
Thank you, Sierra and everyone for the presentation. It feels a little bit awkward to come after all these good presentations that have come before, but I'll try my best, try my shot. First of all, to the men in this webinar, Happy Men's Day, and thank you to the women who make us men for this day. Now, I think on SIDA's, in SIDA's strategy, overall strategy, the mandate that we are given by the government is especially on touch on environment, climate change, energy, water, and in overall we are supposed to make sure that whatever we are investing, it's more of climate neutral. It's renewable energy mostly, and since 2015 we have SIDA, the SIDA strategy. We have this program called the Power Africa, which is coming up with new innovative methods of mobilizing capital from private investment in the renewable energy. It's mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and also looking at to other parts of the world, but especially in Africa, the strategy it seeks to leverage on private sector investment as they realize most of the government funding is becoming limited, and the focus. Just give a moment. There's a small kid here.
No problem.
sorry for that. Now, it's we're trying to leverage on the use of the private sector to push for the renewable energy. As we realize, most of the government funding is becoming limited, or there are many competing needs, and energy is not part of the priorities. And some of the innovative methods that you're coming up in the sector is to address some of these bottlenecks that include transaction advice. How do we advise this private sector in terms of being able to access credit, external credit to expand their businesses? We also are introducing the resource-based financing, whereby we are engaging the private sector, and then we reimburse them with regard to the number of people they have put or to electricity access. Then we also try and do guaranteed backed financing from the Swedish government, whether the projects are viable. And then now you have the public-private development partnership, like what you're having with ILO. This public-private development partnership, PPPs, they create synergies between private sector and public sector, and they draw on the private sector's financial resources, knowledge, problem-solving, innovative capacity, and as well as public agencies' ability to address social and environmental development challenges. Examples of this, I've talked about the Power Africa. That's your funding. Now we have another one that's called the Renewable Energy and Climate Adaptation Technology. It's called REACT, which is it's a very big program I think it's among the biggest energy programs in Somalia, that is also seeking the same leverage on private sector to spark green energy adoption. The modality is the same, resource-based financing, which has proved it's more accountable when it is linked to private sector, and it increases energy access faster than that, as opposed to the use of public funding. Among the challenges of adopting the renewable energy that we have experienced, especially in Somalia, is lack of supportive mechanisms and skills, for example, for installation and maintenance. And this is also then compounded by cheap substandard products in the market. So through the PPDP program with the ILO, we are trying to solve that one of the bottlenecks, which is the skills development, and so that we have trained technicians who can help in installation, maintenance, and also wirings wherever there are no skills available. And also we are doing this where we are supporting women economic empowerment, especially the women in the renewable energy. For example, our approach, for example, on the REACT program, we are focusing on the private sector to access funding. But what we realize that one of the bottlenecks in women entrepreneurs is access to funding. So what you're trying to do in the REACT program is that part of the funding that will go to the private sector, we are lowering the standards required for women to access the funding, such that if you require certain skills or certain amount of, maybe it's requirements like have bank accounts or certified accounts, we are trying to lower the bar so that more women owned companies can be able to apply for this funding, so that we can then talk about capacity building them and even seconding staff within these companies, so that they can be able to upgrade the skill, the capacity of these women-owned companies. So in this context, there is an opportunity to promote gender equality and empower women to integrate the value chains in the renewable energy. And as you realize, women are the primary end users of energy, and women will be the most aware of the needs of their customers. And if you look at it from an African context, most of the men come at around 9 p.m. So between 6 and 9, the women are taking care of the kids. They are cooking. The kids are doing homework. They're learning. So electricity in itself becomes as a big relief for women in terms of access to lighting in their homes. As skills are still lacking, there's an opportunity to build the capacity, both in terms of businesses and technical skills, supporting women integrating these promising value chains. And I've listened about the milk industry, and I'm looking at the potentials that can come if we were to invest in renewable energy. The cooling of milk, if it is adding value to make ghee, to make cheese, to make other products. There's a lot of potential that we can leverage on in the renewable energy. And lastly, when you integrate women in the renewable energy sector, this will lead to the development of more sustainable energy provision and contribute to women economic empowerment and gender equality. And lastly, when you look at the current sources of energy, it is fuel wood, and with the fuel wood, there's increased pollution, especially indoor pollution when women are cooking, as they do most of the house chores, and that in a way affects women's health. The amount of time women take to go and search for firewood is again reduces their productive time. When they go to collect firewood, their threats outside there, chances of rape or sexual violence increases, and therefore, it is not just on Somalia, it's also in Kenya. We just had a case in one of the biggest plantations in Kenya where there have been sex for firewood, and this is Kenya. So it's women get exposed to a lot of these issues of violence. But I think then the renewable energy opportunity comes in and can help reduce all these things. But then we must be able to integrate women both at the process of thinking, at the process of in implementation and the process of evaluating what it is that's working. And the point is that women must be at the decision-making table. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamau, and definitely thank you for all of those linkages, especially with women's economic empowerment in general, but also on the milk value chain. I think that's also a lot for Callie to think of when designing interventions. You know, where are the synergies? I'll move on to our last discussant, Abdul. So Abdul is managing the project in Somalia, and Abdul, I'll ask you to turn your video on. And perhaps you can tell us a little bit more concretely on how this model is being implemented in practice. I see quite a few questions popping up on the chat in terms of skills development for renewable energy, as a lot of participants are pointing out that there's a big skills gap, particularly for women entrepreneurs when it comes to renewable energy, and the project has a big component on that. So I'll let you maybe also expand on that segment a little bit. And tell us a little bit on what has changed in the context of COVID. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing and some opportunities as well?
Thank you very much, Adriana. Are you able to hear me? Are you able to see me, please?
Yes.
So my name is Abdul Qadir Ali. I'm the program manager of this specific project that we are discussing today. Just to, address some of the elements of the question that you have raised. The implementation strategy for the business upgrading model in the framework of the women's economic empowerment component of the project actually aims to respond to two areas of need for women entrepreneurs in Somalia. And actually, the first one is the better service provision from institutions supporting them, and the direct assistance to provide direct assistance to help them actually gain entrepreneurship skills, access to finance, access to markets, as well as now establish networks for cooperatives and for mutual support, and also be more visible and raise their voice for their meaningful representation in the labor market and also in general in the business environment in Somalia. And also the project then works into two main interlinked streams. The first one is now the capacity development of 100 financial and non-financial business development service providers and civil society organizations. In this case also, we try to enforce the technical, organizational and financial sustainability of the existing PDSPs and CSOs in the country, so that they can provide market-based and demand-driven business development services to growth-oriented women entrepreneurs in the country as well. The project also builds the capacity of these organizations to be self-sustaining and continue providing service beyond the time frame of the project. And this is very much aspect of what we do, because now, these initiatives need to be sustained after the end of the program as well. On the other hand, also, we provide training and support to growth-oriented women entrepreneurs. And the project actually provides targeted intensive assistance to 500 established high-potential growth-oriented women entrepreneurs. And also support them to expand and to model effective strategies for value chain and market system development as well. The approach actually, the approach that we have adopted in this project suggests that building the capacity of these women entrepreneurs to collectively identify and advocate for their interests will actually leave a sustainable legacy in the long run. The project further applies a sectoral approach to empower growth-oriented women in the renewable energy sector and in the agriculture to help them overcome the sustainability and growth deficit and reverse the tendency of women's enterprises to actually stagnate over time. During the earlier suggestions, I think also, my colleague Adriana, my colleague Charlene talked about, the steps that have actually, which are standard. But now, to just put into context what we are doing that in relation to Somalia, on the sectoral assessment of women's entrepreneurship development, where the project have assessed on one hand, what the renewable energy sector creates value and what prevents from women entering in the market, and on the other hand as well, what in the agriculture sector attracts and remains women entrepreneurs as well. We are currently also conducting in-depth analysis of looking how the enabling factors for women's empowerment can be actually exported from one sector to the other as well. Secondly, on the business development side as well, depending on now their business needs, the women entrepreneurs are actually receiving trainings, tailor-made trainings and business continuity management to manage the risk and also deal with contingencies as well. And also access to market is very much, important component based on the results of the final chain analysis. We expect the growth-oriented women to be sensitized and on the requirements to access market opportunities and as buyers and suppliers in the local global value chains through, for instance, information, making mechanisms, business linkages, public and corporate procurement, and so on as well. Access to finance. I think this is a very big challenge, and I think also this also relates to some of the items that have been raised in the chat box. The project is currently undertaking a mapping of demand and the supply of financial service and to growth entrepreneurs in Mogadishu and Garowe as well, which are now the two locations of the project. With findings, the project will try to connect these growth-oriented women entrepreneurs to financial institutions, I think. And the last step, visibility and voice and representation. The project is working on an online directory with the service provider as well as now with the with the Somali Chamber of Commerce to actually increase the visibility of these growth-oriented women entrepreneurs. We are also organizing a bunch of advocacy initiatives to increase women's influence on policy, dialogue, and governance of markets. This is something very important, actually, which has been actually mentioned by my colleague Kamal as well. Again, also in the aspect of COVID, the second part of the question, I think COVID has been, a problem for everybody. Including the way we operate, and also now on the business in Somalia, due to now the several restrictions on the health hazard that we are aware of. However, we were able to come up with alternative working modalities while adopting online solutions to conduct trainings as well to these women entrepreneurs. For instance, we certified our trainers, who I believe some of them are actually with us, I think, in this session today, through online, and also they continue to train new customers while also promoting digital learning and exploring alternative digital strategies and preparing for multiple outcomes as well. During the training needs assessment, before we did the training as well, we also included, COVID impact related questions into our questionnaires to actually see how COVID actually impacting these enterprises, and also how possibly we can support them in the future as well. So thank you very much, Adriana. And also, to come on to the second question that you have asked in terms of now the skills deficit in the renewable energy sector. And the program also has another component whereby we're dealing with skills training in the basic electrical service, as well as now the solar PV as well, where women are actually among the caseloads. We have undergone right now the TOTs, where 40% of the overall were women. Yes, the issue of now perceptions are there that this is a male-dominated sector, but what's happening right now is that we're also working on now the change of the mindset to ensure that women are actually able to take part meaningfully in the sector, and to know that what a man can do, women can do better in that sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abdul, for giving us that really good summary of how the project is putting this into practice, and especially how it's building skills in the renewable energy sector. I just wanted to come in. We're also working to support WIRES, which is an organization that is fully staffed by women, and it stands for Women in Renewable Energy Sector in Somalia. And they're also doing great work to really transition, help women transition into the renewable energy sector and providing gender-sensitive support. So we're also working through these type of organizations that are also working in the sector, helping to build their capacity and supporting them as well. So I just wanted to highlight them as a really interesting and good organization that has emerged and that we're happily collaborating with. We have a couple of minutes for questions, and we have quite a few. If we don't get to your question right now during this discussion period, we'll make sure to share the answers, the written answers to the questions in a follow-up email with all the attendees. So we'll definitely get to your question, even if we don't get to it in the scope of this webinar. We have around 10 minutes left. So Charlene, I wanted to direct a question to you, and it's a question that was sent by Gerald, if I can find it. So Gerald says that congratulations that the framework is quite well thought out, but there's a question in terms of institutional options for women to exploit economies of scale beyond cooperatives. So if you could just share a little bit on your insights here, and then we'll come back to another question after that.
Yeah, thank you, Adriana. And then very quickly on this question, because currently we are also conducting a cooperative's needs assessment in the country as part of this project. And I think that the result of this study will inform us on how to maybe address this question. But this is something that we are also questioning ourselves in the project. And we hope that the cooperatives needs assessment will give us some tips and some orientations on how the project can address this. We can also share the results later on when they are ready.
Thank you, Charlene. And a little bit related to that, Dragan has asked, we've been talking about strengthening the voice of women in Somalia, and he mentioned that this is often done through chambers of commerce, and usually the world of chambers of commerce is a very male-dominated one. Dragan is wondering if this is the case in Somalia too, and if there are any women's entrepreneurship associations or something similar that could generally be engaged to promote the voice of women in business. And I know that there are quite a few Somalis in the audience as well, so if you want to also offer an answer to this, you are free to do so. Just raise your hand and I'll allow you to unmute yourself. But yeah, this is an open question as well to perhaps Amelie and Abdul, who have undertaken the research, and Abdul, who is based in Somalia. So the question to get back is there a women's entrepreneurship association or something similar that could really be a platform for amplifying these voices?
Before I come in, even from the audience, I see a couple of familiar faces in the audience. So, okay. So if I may go ahead, the way the Chamber of Commerce, the Somali Chamber of Commerce is constituted, that it has different, actually, sectors which are actually led by different entities, and there are actually sectors which are dominated by women. And I think also the representation in the for women, the chamber actually is led by women. So yes, there is some sort of a representation. A very strong representation in the chamber, but also there are a lot of women-led associations which are available in the country, which can be used as an amplifying forum for this cause as well.
Thank you, Abdul. Anyone else who wants to come in, or can I move on to the next question? All right.
I wanted to say something, I don't know.
Yes, but I think Abdul has answered the question quite well.
Okay.
All right. So Farah has also made a few inputs. Oh, two participants have raised their hand. So let me just come back to those who have raised their hands and allow you to speak. So I'm not seeing the raised hands. Could you write in the chat box if it's you?
I think I saw Farah raising his hand. Farah from Somalia.
Okay, let me see. Farah. So Farah, I've allowed you to talk. You are free to unmute yourself. I also saw that you've been very actively writing a few questions, so I'll also let you maybe come in with an insight on the question that was just asked, and perhaps direct one or two of your questions to the panelists. So Farah, you should be able to, there we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, perfectly.
Hello?
Yes, Farah, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, Farah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yes, Sarah, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Hello?
Okay, so
Yes, thanks so much. It's my pleasure to attend this important event today. I think a lot has been, you have been able to shed light on so many issues. And
I think we have lost Farah. I can't find him in my chat, but we'll address his questions moving forward.
we also have, yes, we also have Muhammad Musa from Somalia. So
Okay. Let me just check. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for catching that, Abdul. Mohammed Musa, I have allowed you to speak. You can unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adriana. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
First of all, thank you very much to the organizers on all the panelists and for presenting this great presentation. It was a very good report with very useful insights, of which we will surely read the full report and use it as an input for our work. I don't have like a big comment, but in the report I saw like one of the like the low participation of women entrepreneurs in access to finance in Somalia was mentioned that it's related to the lack of ownership of land and assets. So I was wondering like this is not only an issue for women entrepreneurs, it's also affecting the whole youth that we train in the country. And I was also wondering that now the banks in Somalia have introduced a new model whereby a group of women entrepreneurs act as guarantors of each other and then they can get access to finance. So do you think this new model can help solve this issue of the challenge that you have in the report? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'll ask my colleague Amelie to maybe offer her thoughts on that. I think it's not a yes or no answer, but perhaps Amelie, you can share a little bit of the insights that you found in terms of land ownership. And I see Abdul has also unmuted himself, which might signal that he also wants to come in on that.
Yes, thank you very much for pointing out that land ownership is not only an issue for women entrepreneurs, but also for the youth in general. I think from the research conducted, access to land remains still a salient issue for women, especially in terms of spoliation regarding inheritance rights and women association. There are women associations in Somalia that are doing advocacy on this topic. So this is still, I think, a key issue. And I thank you very much for bringing up this this mechanism of having groups of women actually sharing the risk. And it's true that several banks and financial institutions mention this as a way of mitigating the lack of access to actual collateral. I think it's a very good point to bring up, and I think it needs to be further looked into. I don't have a yes or no answer, as Adriana mentioned right now, but definitely something to look into more during the value chain analysis, perhaps, or during the financial service providers mapping that will take place as part of the project. Abdul, if you want to add anything, over to you.
Yes, thanks. Yes, and also, to also have some sort of a solid intervention to address this, we are also closely, working with the financial service providers in Somalia to make sure that, we are more aware of now the kind of products that they have, so that at least we can target some sort of a tailor-made products which is our target in the project.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for all of your incredible questions. I see that there are still questions coming in, but I know that I don't want to take any more of your time. This has been a very lively discussion, and I want to thank all of our panelists, all of our discussants as well, and all of you who have participated and contributed with your questions and also in the session. We'll definitely address the questions that we could not respond to right now in writing, and we'll share them with all attendees right after the webinar. You can look for them in your inbox in the next week. so that we can address all of them. Again, thank you very much. We'll also be sharing the link to the full report in case you want to learn more. And if you want to reach out, you can reach us at wed@ilo.org, and we'll respond to your questions and queries. So thank you very much. This was a great webinar to celebrate Women's Entrepreneurship Day, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. So thank you, and have a great afternoon or rest of the day, depending on where you are in the world.